My name is Julia West. I'm 38. And not too long ago, I thought I had everything figured out. A stable marriage. A beautiful home I designed from scratch. And a partner who swore we were in it together. That night, the night everything changed. The house was glowing. Candles flickered on the marble island. The champagne flutes sparkled in their neat rows. And the music drifted softly through the air, like something out of a lifestyle magazine. I had planned my husband's promotion party down to the last grape on the charcuterie board. Daniel had just been named senior vice president at his firm. And this was supposed to be our celebration. I say our because I believed, foolishly, that his success was also mine. After all, I'd put my interior design career on hold to support his relentless climb. I'd hosted the dinners, remembered every client's spouse's name, and helped him craft the perfect image. Around 8 p.m. He clinked his glass and gave a thank you speech in front of our guests. He thanked his colleagues, his team, and then turned to me with a polished smile. To my wife, who has been my constant support. That's what he said. And I smiled like I was supposed to. Even when I caught his mother's expression, tightening from across the room. Linda stood by the fireplace I picked out from a salvage yard and restored with my own hands. She was wearing a silk suit that matched the walls too well. Like she was trying to blend into a future I hadn't been invited to. I noticed her glance at Daniel after the toast. And the way she leaned in was something hushed. Later that night, when most of the guests had gone, Linda asked to speak with me in the kitchen. Daniel was there too. Tipsy, but present. I was still putting leftovers in containers. Still being the hostess. Still holding the shape of a life that was already slipping through my fingers. That's when she said it. That now that Daniel had reached this level, certain changes needed to happen. That I had been sufficient during his building years, but now he needed someone more polished. Someone who could match his status. I thought it was a joke. I laughed. Actually. But she wasn't laughing. And neither was Daniel. He just stood there, avoiding my eyes, his jaw tight, like he'd been practicing this moment in his head for weeks. They had already leased me an apartment. 3 months paid. She said. Like it was generous. Like I should be grateful to be quietly removed from my own life. I stood there, holding a porcelain dish of goat cheese crostinis, blinking at the woman who thought she could fire me from my marriage. And for a moment, I felt completely erased. The party had been beautiful. That's the part that still stings. I think. Everything about it looked like a magazine spread warm lighting. Velvet ribbon around every cloth napkin. A playlist timed to start the jazz cover of a pop song just as guests walked in. I spent weeks planning it. Daniel didn't even know half the details. He just assumed it would be perfect. And it was. That's what I did. I made things look effortless. Even when they cost me sleep, money, or pieces of myself. People smiled and clinked glasses under the vaulted ceiling I'd designed. They complimented the layout, the light fixtures, the food, everything I had curated to make Daniel shine. And I was proud. In a way that you are when you watch someone you love get what they worked for. Even if it means you take a step back into the shadows. I wore a blue dress I'd saved for months. Linda had once said that jewel tones made me look too dramatic. But that night I didn't care. It was my last act of rebellion, though I didn't know it at the time. Claire, Daniel's sister, arrived late as usual and made a point to compare the caterers to the ones she used for her husband's CEO celebration. She said it so casually, but I caught the twist in her smile. I responded that this one fit our budget better. Her smile faltered for a second. The room buzzed with polite conversation. Networking disguised as family bonding. Daniel's brother stood near the wine table, dropping hints about needing new career opportunities. Ashley, though I didn't know her name yet, lingered a little too close to Daniel's side of the room, though not enough to be noticed by anyone not paying attention. I was the only one watching closely. Biten oklok. I was already stacking dessert plates and offering people to-go boxes when Linda cornered me in the kitchen. I was still smiling, still pretending I didn't notice the tension. That's when she said the words. Not cruelly, just efficiently. Daniel joined her. He looked detached, like someone delivering bad news to a colleague. Not his wife. He wouldn't even look me in the eye when he said it was for the best. That he'd outgrown this life, these routines. And yes, this version of me. I remember looking around the kitchen, at the subway tiles I spent 3 weekends installing. The vintage brass handles I scoured 4 cities to find. They were already talking about repainting the cabinets. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just asked one question. When did you start planning this? Linda answered for him. That's irrelevant, she said. It wasn't. It told me everything. Then she handed me an envelope. Inside was a lease agreement for a downtown apartment. 3 months' rent. And a severance package. A severance package. Like I'd been an assistant. A placeholder. A stepping stone. They expected me to crumble. To rage. To beg. Instead, I smiled. Not out of kindness, but because I'd seen this coming. I'd seen the warning signs in every condescending comment. Every dismissal of my work. Every dinner where I wasn't introduced by name. I smiled because they thought I was just a wife. Just a support role. Just a phase. But they had no idea what I really was. And I wasn't finished. The moment I closed the door behind me that night, I stopped being Daniel's wife. I wasn't a victim. And I wasn't going to be a cautionary tale whispered about in country club corners. I was done playing the role they wrote for me. I waited until the house quieted down. Then I went upstairs, packed a single suitcase, and grabbed one thing that mattered more than anything else in that house, the wooden box my grandmother left me. Inside was everything they forgot to ask about. Everything they didn't know to fear. I left my house keys on the marble counter and walked out without a word. The next morning, I called David. Milavier. He'd been waiting for that call since the day I had him draft the paperwork. He didn't ask questions. He just said, "It's time." David had known my grandmother. She wasn't the kind of woman who warned you about storms. She handed you blueprints for a storm shelter and taught you how to pour concrete. She had set up a land trust in my name before I got married. Daniel never noticed. Even when he signed a joint use agreement 3 years ago during a conference call. I had placed the papers in front of him and told him where to sign. He didn't read a word. That signature was about to change everything. David met me in his office overlooking the courthouse square. The moment he opened that box and saw the deed, the contract, the notarized agreement, he smiled. "We own the land. We control the house. They can't touch a thing." He pulled out the formal documents and slid them toward me. "We're filing a cease and desist letter today. Certified mail. Overnight. They'll get it tomorrow afternoon." I nodded and kept my expression neutral. Though inside, I felt something shift. Not joy. Not revenge. Just certainty. The kind that settles in your bones when you know you've prepared for this exact moment. David leaned back in his chair. "Julia, this is airtight. If they want to fight, they'll lose. If they want to settle, they'll pay." I told him I didn't want money. I wanted them out. Not with screaming. Not with cops on the lawn. I wanted it quiet. Clean. Legal. He understood. He always did. That night, I checked into a boutique hotel and watched the house through the security camera I had installed 6 months ago. Linda was already redecorating in her mind, waving her arms in the kitchen like a general planning a campaign. Daniel was in his office on a video call, laughing with someone I didn't recognize. I watched, but I didn't feel rage. I felt distance. They had removed me from the picture. Now it was my turn to remove them from the frame. 3 days after I left, she showed up. Blonde. Polished. too young to have opinions about mid-century architecture, and far too comfortable in my kitchen. Her name was Ashley. I only knew that because Tina, my best friend since college, found her Instagram. Influencer. Lifestyle content. Fit check reels and half-baked recipes filmed in what used to be my dining room. She was already calling it our home. Ashley went live on her account one morning, walking through my house like it was a showroom. She complained about the backsplash, the one I tiled by hand. She called the pendant lights a little too farmhouse. She opened my cabinets, laughed at the spice rack, and mentioned how Daniel wanted to modernize the space. I texted Tina, "Download everything. Screenshots, videos, comments." Tina was already 10 steps ahead. She had folders, labeled. Within hours, the internet turned on Ashley. Someone dug up photos of the house from a year ago. Someone else found my Pinterest board. Another person noticed that Daniel was still legally married. The comment section exploded. "Isn't this someone else's home? Wait, didn't he just get promoted? That backsplash is better than her attitude." By the next day, Ashley posted a crying story. She said she was being bullied by strangers online, that people didn't understand her relationship with Daniel. That love was complicated. I watched it while eating room service pancakes and sipping hotel coffee. My face didn't move. I didn't feel bad for her. I didn't feel anything. Tina called me that night. She sounded giddy. "Julia, you're going viral. And not because you posted anything. People are piecing it together themselves." I reminded her we had legal grounds now. Ashley was posting footage from inside a property she had no lease to occupy. She was making unauthorized changes. I wanted it all documented. "Already done," Tina said. She sent me a file named Attempted Property Alterations. Inside were clips of Ashley talking about knocking out this wall and changing the floors. I saved everything. Let them talk. Let them post. Let them build the story with their own hands. I didn't need to say a word. They were writing my revenge for me. The next morning, David filed the formal eviction notice. It was clean, factual, and final. We gave them 48 hours to vacate the property or face legal consequences, including a hefty invoice. I didn't want to threaten them with police. I wanted something better. I wanted them to understand that even silence has a price. The bill included 3 years of unpaid rent, based on market value, plus retroactive penalties for unauthorized occupancy and property modifications. We totaled everything down to the last square foot of flooring Ashley planned to rip out. The number came out to $1 million. David hand-delivered the documents by courier. Certified. Signed. Time-stamped. Less than 2 hours later, I saw Linda pacing the front lawn on the security feed. She was yelling into her phone, clutching the envelope like it might catch fire in her hands. Daniel came outside, looking like he hadn't slept. They argued for 15 minutes before he stormed back into the house and slammed the door. Claire showed up next. I didn't know what she was saying, but I could tell from her hands that she wasn't helping. Ashley posted a story around the same time, saying they were dealing with some legal hiccup and asking her followers to send positive vibes. The comments had already turned. "Wait? She doesn't even own that house. I can't believe I followed this woman. This is giving." Eviction Corps. Daniel's company called later that afternoon. Not to me, of course not. But to him? His HR rep requested an emergency meeting regarding misuse of company resources. Since someone had flagged Ashley's influencer content as being filmed on company-funded renovations, Tina texted me while I was reviewing paint swatches in my hotel room. They just put him on administrative leave. Public image issues. It's all falling apart. I didn't reply right away. I was too busy measuring curtain lengths for the next chapter. That night, I received a delivery from their lawyer. It was an offer. They wanted to buy my land at a price laughably below market. They framed it as a gracious exit solution. I declined without comment. The next offer came 2 hours later. It was triple the first. I declined again. This time with a note: "This house isn't for sale, but they're welcome to rent it at market value plus damages." Linda musste exploded. The next camera alert showed her throwing a potted plant across the front steps. Ashley was crying again, holding her phone, pacing back and forth in my foyer. Daniel just sat in the corner of the living room, head in his hands, silent. They still thought this was about a house. It never was. Daniel asked to meet. He sounded tired on the phone, like a man who hadn't slept since his world stopped revolving around him. I agreed to lunch. Not because I owed him anything, but because closure tastes better when served cold and expensive. We met at our old favorite restaurant, the one with the wine wall and linen napkins. He looked smaller than I remembered, hollow, like ambition had eaten through his backbone and left him soft. His suit was wrinkled. He wasn't wearing his Rolex. And when he sat down, he didn't even try to pretend he had control. "You look well," he said. I nodded. "You don't." He tried to smile, but it didn't reach his eyes. "I came here to talk," he said. "To fix this. You were right. I messed up. Ashley's gone. My family's falling apart. Work suspended me. I don't even know who I am anymore." I sipped my water. "That's a start." He flinched. "Julia, please. What do you want?" I pulled out the folder David prepared. I slid it across the table. "Everything's outlined here. Every penny. Every inch of that house. Every clause you never read." He opened it and started skimming. Then he stopped at the part about Ashley's live stream. About the illegal renovations? About the 1.8 million. "This is insane," he whispered. "This is vengeance." "No. This is the invoice." He looked at me like he didn't recognize me. Maybe he never had. "You planned this," he said. "From the beginning." "No. I protected myself. There's a difference. You had 12 years to know me. You chose not to." He didn't respond. The waiter came. I ordered the steak. He asked for coffee. "My mother wants to sue on," he said when the waiter left. "Emotional distress. Public damage. She can try, but I'll counter with harassment and trespassing. Claire and Trevor aren't speaking to me. I think they're suing each other now. Over some family heirlooms. Funny how loyalty dries up when the money does." He paused. "Julia, please. What do you want?" I looked him in the eye for the first time in weeks. "I want you to understand what you threw away. Not just me. Not just the house. But everything I built while you were busy pretending I was background." His phone buzzed. He checked it. Then groaned. "Ashley again. She's threatening to post about this. Says she found something in the house. She's trying to turn the story against you." I smiled. "Let her. You don't care." I pulled out my phone and showed him the cease and desist David had prepared 2 days ago. "If she posts one word about me or that house, she'll be facing her own lawsuit. She doesn't have the stomach for it." He looked like he wanted to cry. "Julia, please. Just tell me what you want." I already did. "You have 48 hours. He dropped his head. "You were always smarter than me. Weren't you? No. I was just never as selfish." Then I stood up. I left the check on the table. And I walked out. He never followed me. After I left that lunch, everything began to unravel in ways I never expected but secretly hoped for. Ashley, the blonde influencer, who once smiled for my guests in my kitchen, now posted tearful videos claiming she'd been tricked. Living with a married man, she said, was the worst mistake of her life. Her followers turned on her fast. Daniel's family began tearing themselves apart. Linda, the queen of control, suddenly looked small and frantic. Claire and Trevor, once united by blood, were now at each other's throats, filing lawsuits over disputed heirlooms and financial statements. Old resentments bubbled to the surface. I watched it all quietly. No gloating. No celebration, just the calm observation of a house of cards collapsing. The very same house they tried to take from me. Even Daniel's company put him on administrative leave. The HR department cited public relations concerns after Ashley's scandal went viral, and the lawsuits started piling up. It was the beginning of the end for him. I received texts and emails from acquaintances and strangers alike. People called it poetic justice. Others whispered that I'd been merciless. I smiled when I read that. No mercy was needed. I just played my part. The best part, watching them crash, wasn't satisfying because they lost a house or a job. It was because they finally faced consequences for choosing status over loyalty, appearances over honesty. And me, I was already looking forward. That house, the one they tried to erase me from, became my sanctuary again. But this time, it wasn't just my home. It was my mission. I stripped away the gaudy changes Ashley made. The cheap gold paint on the walls was scrubbed off. The unapproved renovations torn down. Every corner whispered stories of betrayal, but also resilience. My grandmother's words echoed in my mind. She was the woman who taught me that power isn't about control, it's about preparation. When I was a child, she handed me a wooden box filled with legal documents and told me to guard it like a treasure. I never understood why until now. I launched the Her Foundation retreat right here. In that house. A place where women could learn to protect themselves financially, legally, and emotionally, to build their own foundations before anyone else tried to tear them down. The first group arrived nervous but hopeful. They carried stories like mine: betrayal, loss, underestimation, but also the hunger to reclaim their power. We spent days talking contracts, property rights, self-worth, and healing. I shared my story not as a victim, but as a guide who had walked the path. My grandmother's journal lay open on the table, its worn pages filled with wisdom that I was honored to pass on. This house, once a symbol of betrayal, became a beacon of strength. Every renovation, every meeting, every story shared here was a brick laid in the foundation of a new legacy, not just for me, but for every woman ready to build her own. A few months later, my phone rang one evening. It was Claire. Her voice cracked with desperation as she told me she was facing what I had. Her marriage was collapsing, and her mother was pushing her out just like I had been. I didn't hesitate. I told her I would help, but not for free. She had to come to the retreat to learn what I had learned. Empowerment wasn't something you could borrow or inherit, it had to be earned. When she arrived, she looked like a different person. Still hoot, but with a flicker of hope in her eyes. I handed her a welcome basket, a notebook, a copy of Property Law Basics, and a small wooden box like the one my grandmother gave me. We spent days unraveling her story, reading contracts, and building strategies. She learned how to protect herself, not just legally, but emotionally too. One afternoon, as the retreat came to a close, I gathered the group in the living room. The same room where I once felt powerless now echoed with voices ready to reclaim their lives. I looked around at the women, their stories, their scars, their determination, and felt a quiet pride. Revenge had been just a chapter. This was the real story. I closed my grandmother's journal and said, "Let's begin building. First ourselves, then our homes, then our futures." This house, the one they tried to take from me, was no longer a battleground. It was a foundation, and together, we were building something stronger than betrayal.